Hello everyone, my name is Lanso90 and welcome to this introductory video for my Battlestar Galactica board game playthrough. So I played this the other day and just decided I needed to make a intro video for this series before I just upload it because otherwise you guys might not know what's going on. So this is a board game that you can play online through the Vassal engine is what it's called. And it's based on Battlestar Galactica, which is pretty cool. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but I think we're going to start first with the characters. So each person picks a character at the start of the game, and these are somewhat sorted by the rank of the character. So whoever is the highest ranked military leader will automatically become the admiral of the fleet, and that gives him some extra options, allows him to pick destinations when the fleet jumps, and it allows him to launch nukes. But and check the actual succession list here in the rules. And this is one list when you're playing just the base game. And if you're using the expansions, you use this list. You can always refer back to this in case, because these aren't always completely ordered, like Helena Kane is above William Adama in ranking. So each character, they have these numbers here with colors next to them and names. So leadership and tactics for William Adama. These are the cards he draws each turn. He draws 3 leadership and 2 tactics. Saltai is the opposite, 2 leadership, 3 tactics. Carl Agathon, 2 leadership, 2 tactics, 1 piloting. So on and so forth. You can see all the different cards down here. There's treachery, politics, leadership, tactics, piloting, and engineering. Generally, it'll be just the last 5 that are ones that you draw from. Treacheries are always bad cards, pretty much. They're never positive. But there are a character or 2 that draws them. But I think it's only the expansion characters that have anyone who can draw them. I think it's Ellen Tai, and then the Cylon leaders can also draw treachery. Anyway, so that was the military leaders. They get the chance to be admiral. You'll also see these over here. The top one is their ability that they can use quite often. It'll usually say like when you use it. It's usually in action or like once per turn. So Adama, it says when you draw a crisis card, all 1 strength skill cards count positive for the check. And we'll go over what that means later. Then every character has a once per game ability. So once per game after resolving a skill check, instead of discarding the skill cards, draw them into your hand. Again, we'll cover what the skill check and stuff is later. And then everyone has a penalty. So Dama is emotionally attached. You may not activate the Admiral's Quarters location. Go over all the buildings, or all the rooms here in a second. But they're all like this. Generally, the lower down in the rankings you go, the better their abilities and the weaker their trait will be, their negative trait. And that's just to balance out with the fact that they aren't higher in the ranking list. So it is possible for like Admiral to be Louis Hosey if no one else picks a military leader above him, which would be kind of funny. But he has really good skills. But since he's low on the list, there's a good chance he won't be Admiral. Someone else picks him. Pilots, these guys can go into the Vipers, which you can launch Vipers without people in them, but they aren't as good. They're easier to shoot down and stuff. And they also get these piloting cards, which give you special abilities you can use while you're in a Viper that are extremely powerful. But they're only good for when you're in a Viper, so some of these characters, like I think Carl Agathon here, he gets piloting, but he's a military leader. So those piloting cards are pretty much useless to him. I think it depends if it's on the rules somewhere. I don't think it's in these short rules, though. Not everything is listed here. You have to have like the extended manual to know. But I think anyone who has piloting cards can be a pilot. It's probably not efficient for them to be the pilot. The highest ranking pilot will also be the CAG if you are playing with some of the expansions. I think it's the Daybreak one. I could be wrong though. And the CAG, he's not as familiar with what it does, but let's see. I can grab it. CAG. Drag this onto the table so we can look at it. A civilian ship needs to be placed on the main game board. You must choose the space area. You get to pick where it goes, pretty much. You have to pick a spot that doesn't have any civilian ships in it, if you're able to. He can use an action to activate one unmanned Viper, and then he can give the CAG tile to any other human player. Normally, they won't ever do that, unless there's some kind of emergency, probably. Or they just want to give the CAG to someone else, for some reason. The other action is once per turn, you are piloting a Viper. You may activate one unmanned Viper and then take another action. That means when they launch in a Viper, they can launch a unmanned Viper, and then they can still do one more action within their own Viper, pretty much. So it allows them to take a bunch of actions right in a row, which is very useful. Okay, let's go back to the character list. Political leaders. The highest ranking political leader will be the president. And the president gets to draw quorum cards, which are pretty powerful cards. You'll often see them staying in Colonial 1 instead of being in Galactica. But let's grab the president's card. Pretty sure that's pretty much all there is to them, is they get to draw the quorum cards and use them. Start the game with one quorum card. You can use an action to draw a quorum card into your hand. When you play a quorum card, okay, that's a expansion thing, so normally that won't come up. Okay, let's go to supports. Support, they don't have a special role, so their ranking doesn't matter. But each one does slightly different stuff. Tyrrell is really good for repairs, because after he uses a repair card, he can take another action. So he could potentially repair twice. Doc Coddle, a lot of people agree that he's pretty useless, because he actually can't use his engineering cards, which is 2/5 of his hands, which is really crappy. He can give his cards to other players, but every time I've seen people play him, they actually never give their cards to anyone. So, Gaius Baltar, people consider him to be a little bit overpowered, because he can take other people's miracle tokens, is what he does. And miracle tokens are what your once per game is based on. Callie, she's a character who can use their once per game to execute another character, which is interesting. She also has a pretty big list of skill cards you can draw. She draws them from a bunch of different fields, I should say. And Duala is really good with the communications room, which allows you to move spaceships, but the civilian ships. But she can move them further and can do more with them. Okay, so with that out of the way, we're going to grab a character just for example's sake. I suppose we'll go with Carl Agathon here. So usually when people pick their characters, they'll put them over on this list over here, and they'll put them in the order of who's going to go first and stuff. So Carl's abilities is ECO officer. During your turn, you may re-roll a die that was just rolled. So he's really good for fighting off Cylons in the armory, because that's based on a roll. Weapons control, that's based on a roll. FTL jump, that's also based on a roll. There's a lot of stuff based on rolls that would really help if you're playing as him. And Moral Compass is his once per game. See how easily this thing disappears. After a player makes a choice on a crisis card, he may change it. We'll get to that in a moment. But his negative trait is he's gone for the first turn of the game and doesn't get to do anything on his first turn. So the first thing people do on their turn is they draw their leadership tactics, or they draw their cards. So in this case, we draw 2 leadership, 2 tactics, and a piloting card. We get to our hand up here. So we have declare emergency. After a strength is totaled in the check, reduce its difficulty by 2. So you do that if you're about to fail a check, but you can fix it by lowering the difficulty by 2. We'll get to that later. Executive order, these are really useful. You use your action in order to give someone else 2 actions, of which they can use one of those to move if they need to, or they can take both actions. It's also very good for using weapons control of the armory because they can use it twice in a row if they are in that room. Otherwise, they'll have to move to it first, and that uses one of their actions. Strategic planning is also very useful. Before any die roll, you can add 2 to the result. Launch Scout is a little bit useless. It has some things you can do with it, but you use a Raptor to scout, and you can look at the top of the Destination or Crisis deck and then choose where to put it. Then Maximum Firepower is a piloting card. It's a very powerful piloting card. When you're piloting a Viper, you may attack up to 4 times, which is a lot. Because everything only needs 1 hit to be destroyed except for the base stars. So it's all just up to as many rolls and how high you can roll. So that's the start of our turn. Let's grab another token here. It's the step marker, I think is what we're looking for. Okay. Let's zoom in on this thing. So this spell token will show you like what you do each turn. So you receive your skill cards. Next step you can move. So ordinarily as Carl, you do still draw your cards as Carl, but ordinarily on his first turn he wouldn't be on the Galactica. But since we're just trying to show how the game works, we will put him on the Galactica anyway. If I can find him, there he is. So each person's card, and Carl is this little bit of an exception, so we'll look at someone else's card like Lewis Hoshi. At the bottom underneath his penalty thing, it says where you place them at the start. So he starts in communications, which is here. Hilo, when he does come back, he does start on the Hammer deck, so that's where we're going to say he started at. But now we can move. So when there's no Cylons on the board, one of the things you might want to do is like go to the research lab, because it's kind of useless in a tactical situation, but when you're not in a tactical situation, it's pretty useful. And you can use your action, which is our next step, to draw 1 engineering or tactics card. We'll grab engineering since we want to have these ordinarily. See what we got. Oh, I added it to the Destiny deck. Oops. We'll just undo that. Draw to hand is what I meant to do. Scientific research. Unfortunately, I have too many cards now, and even though it does the zoom in thing, there's too many to read. Scientific research. Before all cards are played to a skill check, all engineering cards in the check count as positive strength. Again, we'll be getting to that in a moment. In fact, it'll be right now. So here's our crisis turn. Crisis of our turn. Go to cards, crisis. I'm going to shuffle these just in case. Some of these decks automatically shuffle, some of them don't. Crisis usually shuffles, but the last game I was in, it didn't seem like it was shuffled. So we'd click and drag that onto that spot there. Now we can take a look at this crisis. Earth and Ruins. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. I'm actually going to zoom in because that card's just going to keep disappearing from our zoom in view thing. So it has a 9 here, which means that's how difficult it is to pull off. That's how many points of skill cards you have to put in. says yellow, green, and purple, which are politics, leadership, and tactics, count as positive, and the other two count as negative because they're not listed. The current player chooses, so this means we, as the current player who drew this crisis, get to pick between this top choice and bottom choice. The top one, you do the skill check, and the bottom one, you just don't. So the bottom one is -1 food, and the current player draws 1 mutiny card. So if we look up here, these are our resources. If any of these go to 0, we lose. So food, if we decided to do that one, we decrease it by 1. If it gets to 0, we lose. And mutiny cards, I guess we'll go over that right now while we are on them. So mutiny cards it's kind of a double-edged sword. Everything with this game is a double-edged sword. So like every crisis is bad. There's like pretty much no good crisis. But some are not as bad as other ones. Like this one, I'd say it's alright. It's not very bad. And we'll go over the reasons why it's not too bad in a moment. But mutiny cards are the same way. They're always a little bit bad, but they can also be a little bit helpful. So even though we're not technically doing that option, I'm still going to draw it to hand so we can just look at it. Let's go to our hand. Weapons armed. Destroy 1 raptor, so that's crappy. Gain an assault raptor. That's better. Assault raptors are better than regular raptors. Then launch 2 raiders from each base star. That's bad. So see, that's why. And if you have 2 of these mutiny cards, you go to the brig. So at some point you have to play these if you don't want to go to the brig. Also, it says you cannot play this card if there are no raptors in the reserve. That's not a problem right now because we have 4 of them. And these regular raptors are just pretty much to be destroyed. That's all they do, because they do the scouting, and if they fail the scout, they get destroyed. So what we do is we destroy it, then we get another one of these raptors. And the difference between these things is the assault raptors, these things, count as vipers, so you can pilot them and stuff. And anytime it's referring to vipers, it's also referring to these. Difference is, when you warp out at the end of your jump preparation, they stay where they are, and the vipers return to reserve. Of course, if there was a base star on the map, it would launch raiders. So the best time to play that mutiny card would be when there's no base star, because then they couldn't do anything. And then it wouldn't be quite as negative of a thing to deal with. So let's continue talking about this card. The reason I say it's not a very bad crisis is, for one thing, its difficulty isn't very high. 9 isn't too bad. It's kind of average. 3 colors work with it for the positive strength. Sometimes it's only 2. And the negatives aren't terribly bad. So it's -1 food if you do the ore, plus the mutiny card. If you pass, it's just -1 morale. The fail is a little bit bad at -2 morale. So you don't want to fail this check. So that's why there's an option of a choice here. If you feel that people are going to play cards into the check that are going to hurt, like people can play the treachery cards, no one knows that you play a card. It doesn't tell you what card you played. So people could play treachery cards, and those will do bad things. People could play the negative cards if they wanted to, if they were a Cylon or something. So if someone wanted to spike the check to make sure you got -2 morale, they could do that. So that's why you might choose the ore option. Even though if you pass it, you're going to have better overall. It's just a risk that you have to take. So let's start as if we're going to do this check. So before people play their cards, they can, before they start putting cards into the check, that is, they can play cards that say, play this before a skill check. So if you recall, this scientific research, play this before a skill check. All engineering cards account as positive. We're going to do that. Usually people just drag it onto the board up there. Doesn't really matter. So that means these engineering cards will now count as positive. So that means the only thing that could hurt the check are piloting cards. Now, anyone else can play cards like this before the start. But in this case, since we're the only person, no one else is going to play one. People don't always do it. It's just something you should keep in mind. If a check seems like it's dangerous, you might want to try to help it. Some of those cards. Now, next thing that we do is, well, first I have to build a Destiny deck, which is what the host usually does. You put 2 cards from every category into the Destiny deck. Basically, the Destiny deck is to add randomness and uncertainty to a skill check. And this deck, I know, doesn't shuffle by default, so you have to shuffle it. And now we move 2 of these to the skill check. So we don't know what those are. They could be... Chances are they're probably good, because there's only one color that could be bad. But generally, cards, they have a point value between 0 and 6 is the complete list, but it's usually 1 to 5 that you'll see. So if the skill check was really bad against you with the Destiny deck, it could be minus 10. It's unlikely. It could also be positive 10, so, just keep that in mind when you're deciding what to do. Also, as you get through all these crises and see what the Destiny deck has played, once you get down to like the last 2 cards, you should be able to figure out what they are. Roughly what they are. But, yeah, let's go ahead. So, the next thing people do is people start playing cards into a skill check. Now, normally, the first person to play cards would be the next person who's under you, then under them, and under them, and under them, until it gets back to you. You're the last person to play cards into the skill check. But since there's no one else here, we will decide to play cards. So if we wanted to spike the check to try to fail it, we could put in the piloting card with -4. Or we could play any other card to help it out. All of our cards are pretty useful, though. Except for maximum firepower, but obviously we can't use that right now. Something that we could do, if we thought this was important enough, is even though declare emergency is useful for after a skill check, this one is worth more to put into the skill check. You see these numbers up here? That's how many points they're worth and how much they'll help you with the skill check. So this would give us +4 to the check but if we played it into the check, instead of just 2 if we played it after the check. So we'll go ahead and play it into the check. And we'll also play Launch Scout, because it's not very particularly useful. That's all we're going to do. There's no other players, so let's start drawing. Okay, so we got a treachery card from the Destiny deck here. And of course, if there was a lot of people playing cards and this was something that came up, people would start wondering, did someone put a treachery card into the check? But that's extremely unlikely in the first turn, because there's no people drawing treachery cards unless they're Ellen, and obviously if Ellen played a card right now, they'd figure it out it was her. Except it could be the Destiny deck, so. And obviously this time it was. This was obviously our card. It's +1. This is another Destiny card deck, +1. And then 4 more, so that puts us at +6, so we failed the check. Wasn't enough points. And this card says skill check on it. So anything that says skill check does a special thing during the check. So in this case, it says place 2 raiders in front of Galactica. Do that. And it's doesn't have any negative effects, or it doesn't have a strength 0, which means it doesn't boost the negative points. But if treachery cards do have a positive value on there, then it will lower your skill check. No matter what, it doesn't, because it's not included in this list of things that could boost the check. So discard all those. We take -2 morale, which really sucks. So in that case, we would have been better off to do the or option. Raiders activate is the next step. You see the bottom left here, that icon means Raiders activate. And raiders, when they activate, they go clockwise. If there is a civilian ship, when you start the game, there are civilian ships, usually like 2 back here. And if they're in the back like that, they go clockwise. If one was like here, they would go the other way instead. They'd go there. And obviously, if one was there, they'd still go clockwise. If there is no raiders, I think they can attack Galactica. Activate Cylon. That was the step we just did. Next step is prepare for jump. And there is a jump prep on this icon. That's what the bottom right-hand corner icon means. So you do that, you increase the jump prep. And should be the end of the turn. Yep, that's the end of our turn. So now you kind of get the idea of what happens every turn. Obviously, you want to get to the jump track. And so we can see what that does. I'm just going to do that. It's going to play some sound here in a second.
All hands, prepare for jump in 4, 3, 2.
Now, depending on what expansions you're using, if you're just playing the base game, everything disappears. These get reshuffled, I think. I don't think they go to the game box. And these would go over here. Actually, you just click destroyed to send them up here automatically. But if you are playing with the expansions, the civilian ships still stay. Vipers go back into the reserve still, and the assault raptors stay out if they were out. But the raiders would go to the Cylon fleet board in this square. And over here, the Cylon fleet has its own pursuit track. That's like their jump track before they jump in and attack you. Just depends on what mod you're playing. Or what version you're playing, I should say. So since we jumped, the Admiral, in this case we would be the Admiral, gets to choose a destination. Cards, destination. Again, I'm just going to shuffle this deck because we can. And we draw 2 to our hand. Go to our list here. Looks like stuff's getting buried. Sometimes that happens. Okay, they just stacked on top of each other. So here's our choices. We have Deep Space. Oh, dang, it's not zooming in. Which is lose 1 fuel and lose 1 morale. And we move 2 distance. That's what that means down there. Barren Planet, we lose 2 fuel. So neither one of these choices are very stellar. Again, this is another example of the destination cards are pretty much always bad. But it's just a lesser of 2 evils kind of thing. So in this case, we look at our stuff. Say, well, our morale's already taken a hit of 2. So it's probably better to go to the Barren Planet to fuel instead, because we don't want to lose more morale. Also, it's interesting to keep in mind, I forgot to talk about this, but the objective of our game is to get to a location. Let's try to find... Here they are. So with the base game, you only have Cobalt as the option. With everything else, you get all these other ones. But usually it'll be Cobalt. So, oops. Drag that down here. Should have done that at the start, actually. Whoops, no. So this says we got to reach 8 in order to... well, we've got to reach 8 and then jump 1 more time to win. And at 4 distance, sleeper 8... Oh, we didn't talk about loyalty cards. Damn, I should have talked about that. Anyway, at 4 distance, the sleeper agent phase begins. I'll talk about that shortly because I forgot to talk about that. But generally, since this is 8 distance and we start with 8 fuel, there's enough fuel for 1 fuel per distance. So this actually isn't a bad choice. It's not great, but it's 2 fuel for 2 distance, so it evens out. But let's talk about the sleeper agent phase and the loyalty card. So at the start of the game, all the players draw a loyalty card. We forgot to do that. Let's see. It depends on how many people are in the game, how many loyalty cards you're going to put in. It also depends on if you're playing with the expansions or not. Let's just pretend that we're not playing with the expansions. Let's say there are 4 players. So with 4 players, there would be 6 human cards and 1 Cylon card. So I'll put loyalty deck 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then a Cylon card. This was another deck I think that... Oh, it's not letting me shuffle it. Well, hopefully it's shuffled. Thought this was one that you also had to shuffle, but it looks like it might be doing it on its own. I don't really know. So at the start of the game, each character draws 1. So that was with 4 players, what did I say? Yeah, that was with 4 players. So obviously with 7 cards, that means 3 aren't going to be drawn. So I draw 1. See who we are. We're most likely a human, but could possibly not be. Yep, we are not a Cylon. So it's usually slightly unlikely that there will be a Cylon at the start of the game, because there's always more human cards than Cylon cards. But you never know. And there are a couple of characters who draw extra loyalty cards. You can find the right tab. That would be Gaius Baltar, the standard one. He starts the game with 2 loyalty cards, so he has to draw 2, so he's more likely to be a Cylon at the start. And then the pilots, Sharon Valeri draws 2 loyalty cards during the sleeper phase. So when we reach the sleeper phase, everyone would draw 1 card again, 1 more loyalty card. So you can be a human at the start and turn into a Cylon. See what fate would have done to us. We're still not a Cylon. So it's going to be most of the time. Of course, in the sleeper phase, Sharon would draw 2 instead of 1. I think that covers everything. So for the win, we have to get to 8 distance and then jump 1 more time. It doesn't matter how much distance. It doesn't matter what you lose based on what the card says. You just win. You jump. So I think that basically covers everything. There's a lot of depth to this game, even though it's kind of basic when you get down to it. And there's a lot of complexities and stuff that people have to argue out during the game to figure out. But I hope you all enjoyed, and have a good day.